The crashed ship lay broken on the red sand like a dead metal beast. Smoke still rose from its twisted engines, and the smell of burned circuits filled the hot air. 6 beings stood around the wreckage, looking at their new home on the desert planet called Velthros. Timon wiped sweat from his face and looked around at his fellow survivors. The human engineer had short black hair and wore a simple blue worksuit. His hands were already dirty from checking the ship's remains for useful parts. Next to him stood Sora, another human. She had long dark hair tied back and carried a small device that beeped as it measured the air and ground around them. The other 4 survivors were not human at all. Veltar looked like a walking crystal statue. The alien's body was made of clear blue stone that sparkled in the desert sun. When Veltar moved, tiny lights danced inside the crystal skin. The being's face had no mouth or nose, just 2 bright white points where eyes should be. Mordax was the size of a small truck and looked like a giant bug. The alien's body was covered in thick black plates that looked harder than steel. 6 strong legs held up the heavy body, and 2 long arms ended in sharp claws. When Mordax spoke, the voice came from somewhere deep inside the armored body. Lys was the strangest of all. The alien had no solid body at all. Instead, Lys looked like a cloud of green gas that moved and changed shape. Sometimes the gas formed something like a face, and sometimes it spread out like fog. When Lys talked, the voice seemed to come from the air itself. The 6th survivor was called Kes. This alien looked almost human but had gray skin and 4 arms. Kes was tall and thin, with large black eyes that never seemed to blink. "We need shelter," Timon said, looking at the empty desert that stretched in all directions. "The sun is getting hotter and we don't know what the nights are like here." Veltar made a sound like wind chimes. "Do not worry, human. My people have built cities among the stars. This small problem is nothing to us." The crystal alien walked to a flat area near the ship and raised both arms. Light began to glow inside Veltar's body, getting brighter and brighter. Suddenly, a dome of blue energy appeared around the alien. The dome was as big as a house and hummed with power. "My energy shield will keep out heat, cold, wind, and any dangerous animals," Veltar explained. The alien's voice sounded proud. "It can last for many days without needing more power." Mordax made a deep rumbling sound that might have been laughter. "Energy shields are for weaklings," the big alien said. "Watch and learn." The insect-like alien began digging into the hard ground with claws that moved faster than human eyes could follow. Sand and rock flew through the air as Mordax dug deeper and deeper. Soon the alien had made a hole big enough for several people. But Mordax did not stop there. The alien kept digging, making tunnels that went in different directions underground. The walls of the tunnels were smooth and strong. Mordax had made them by pressing the dirt with incredible strength. "My burrow will stay cool in the day and warm at night," Mordax called from deep in the hole. "The thick walls will stop any storm or enemy. This is how real survivors live." Lys began to move in circles around a rocky area. As the gas alien moved, the air itself began to change. The wind started blowing in a strange pattern, and the temperature dropped several degrees. "I am changing the air around this place," Lys said. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I will make a bubble of perfect air that moves with me. No shelter is needed when you can control the very sky." Kes simply found a large rock and sat down in its shadow. "My people can go without food or water for many days," the 4-armed alien said calmly. "I will wait here until rescue comes." All the aliens turned to look at the 2 humans. Timon had started walking around the crash site, picking up pieces of metal, strips of cloth, and broken parts from the ship. Sora was helping him, gathering rocks and filling containers with sand. "What are you doing?" Veltar asked. The crystal alien sounded confused. Timon held up a bent piece of metal sheeting. "Building a shelter," he said simply. The aliens looked at each other. Mordax made that rumbling sound again. "With those scraps?" "Human, my claws could tear through that metal like paper. The wind alone would blow that away," Lys added. The gas alien sounded amused. Veltar's lights flickered in what might have been laughter. "Humans are so primitive. On my world, we stopped using physical materials for building thousands of years ago. Energy is much better." But Timon did not seem upset by their words. He kept working, laying the metal sheets on the ground in a careful pattern. Sora helped him, using rocks to hold the sheets in place while Timon bent and shaped them. "Why are you putting them at that angle?" Sora asked. "To deflect wind and debris," Timon explained. "If we make the walls straight up and down, the wind will hit them full force. But if we angle them like this, the wind will slide off. The humans worked through the hot afternoon. They used strips of cloth from the ship's emergency supplies to tie the metal pieces together. They built a frame from broken pipes and covered it with more cloth and metal sheets. The shelter they made looked rough and simple compared to the aliens' creations. Kes shook his head with all four arms crossed. I have seen human settlements before. Always so basic, so crude. It is amazing your species ever made it to space. Perhaps they were lucky, Veltar suggested, or maybe other species helped them. As the sun began to set, the aliens settled into their advanced shelters. Veltar sat in the middle of the energy dome, surrounded by blue light. Mordax disappeared into the tunnel system, and the sound of digging continued from below. Liss became a thick cloud that hovered over the rocky area, and Kes simply lay down in the shadow of the large rock. The two humans sat outside their simple shelter, eating food from the ship's emergency supplies. Their shelter looked like a pile of junk compared to the others. Do you think it will hold? Sora asked quietly. Taemin looked at their work and nodded. It will hold. My grandfather taught me that the best shelters work with nature, not against it. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. In the distance, the wind began to pick up and strange clouds appeared on the horizon. The next morning brought new challenges to the survivors on Velthros. The sun rose like an angry red eye in the purple sky, and the temperature climbed quickly. But it was not just the heat that worried Sora as she checked her small weather device. The air pressure is dropping, she told Taemin, as they ate their breakfast of ship rations, and there are strange electromagnetic readings coming from the north. Taemin looked up from the metal sheet he was hammering into shape. He had been working since dawn, adding more pieces to their shelter. What kind of electromagnetic readings? Sora frowned at her device. I have never seen anything like this. The patterns keep changing and they are getting stronger. She pointed toward the horizon where dark clouds were gathering. Something big is coming. The other survivors did not seem worried about Sora's warnings. Veltar was sitting in the energy dome, and the blue light around the crystal alien pulsed steadily. Human instruments are so basic, Veltar said when Sora shared her readings. My energy sensors detect nothing dangerous. These readings are probably just solar interference. Mordax poked his armored head out of one of the tunnel entrances. Underground is always safe, the insect alien said. Whatever comes, it cannot reach me down here. I have dug deep enough to avoid any surface problems. Liss had spread out into a thin green mist that covered a wide area. I can feel the air currents for miles around, the gas alien reported. There is wind coming, yes, but nothing I cannot handle. I have controlled much worse storms on my homeworld. Kes just shrugged with all four arms. My people have survived ice ages, solar flares, and cosmic radiation storms. A little weather on this small planet means nothing to us. But Sora was not satisfied with their answers. She spent the morning exploring the crash site, looking for more information. In the ship's computer, she found old weather records from Balthros. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Taemin, she called, running back to their shelter. You need to see this. The human engineer stopped his work and looked at the data Sora had found. The computer showed weather patterns going back hundreds of years. Most of the time, Valthros was just a hot, windy desert planet. But every few years, something terrible happened. Look at these readings, Sora said, pointing at the screen. Every 7 to 10 years, the planet gets hit by massive storms. They call them red destroyers in the records. Taemin studied the data carefully. The storms were not just wind and sand. They brought electromagnetic chaos, extreme temperature changes, and atmospheric pressure drops that could kill most life forms. The last big storm had happened 8 years ago. We are due for another one, Taemin said quietly. Sora nodded. And according to this data, it should be the worst one in recorded history. The electromagnetic readings I detected this morning match the pattern exactly. They tried again to warn the other survivors, but the aliens remained confident in their superior abilities and technology. Electromagnetic storms cannot affect my crystal matrix, Veltar explained patiently, as if talking to children. My people have traveled through the hearts of stars. A simple planetary storm is nothing. Mordax was even more dismissive. Let the surface burn, the armored alien said. I will be safe in my tunnels. The deeper I go, the safer I become. Even if the whole planet shakes, my burrow will protect me. Liss swirled in patterns that showed amusement. I am the storm, the gas alien declared. How can a storm hurt me when I am made of the same forces? I will simply become part of it and ride it out. Kes listened to the human's warnings but shook his head. My species has faced extinction events before. We always survive because we are adaptable. Whatever this storm brings, I will endure it. Frustrated but not surprised, Taman went back to work on their shelter. He added more anchor points, driving metal spikes deep into the rocky ground. He sealed every gap he could find with strips of cloth and salvaged rubber. He built a simple air filtration system using torn fabric, sand, and charcoal from the ship's fire extinguishers. Why are you working so hard? Sora asked as she helped him arrange rocks around the base of the shelter. The others think we are wasting our time. Taman wiped sweat from his face and looked at the growing storm clouds on the horizon. My father worked in disaster relief back on Earth. He always said that people who survive disasters are not the strongest or the smartest. They are the ones who prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Throughout the day, the signs got worse. The wind picked up, blowing sand in strange patterns. The electromagnetic readings on Sora's device went wild, jumping from normal to dangerous levels and back again. The temperature began to swing from hot to cold every few minutes. Animals that lived in the desert began to act strangely. Small lizards that usually hid during the day came out and ran in circles. Flying creatures that looked like metallic birds gathered in huge flocks and flew away toward the south. Even the few desert plants seemed to be pulling their leaves and branches closer to their stems. The local wildlife knows something is coming, Sora observed. They are all seeking shelter or leaving the area. But the aliens paid no attention to these natural warning signs. They trusted their technology and their evolved abilities more than the ancient wisdom of desert creatures. As the sun began to set on their second day, the wind grew stronger. Sand began to blow across the ground in sheets. The electromagnetic readings on Sora's device maxed out and stayed there. Lightning flickered in the distant clouds, but it was not normal lightning. It was green and purple, and it moved in ways that lightning should not move. Taemin made final adjustments to their shelter, checking every bolt and tie. He had built extra braces and backup supports for the main structure. The air filtration system was ready, and he had stored water and food inside sealed containers. Will it be enough? Sora asked as they prepared to spend the night in their simple shelter. Taemin looked at the approaching storm, and then at the confident aliens in their advanced shelters. We will find out soon, he said. But I would rather trust human engineering that has been tested by thousands of years of natural disasters than alien technology that has never faced a red destroyer. As if in response to his words, a low rumble came from the north. It was not thunder. It was deeper and more terrible, like the planet itself was groaning in pain. The real test was about to begin. The red destroyer hit Valthros like the anger of an ancient god. It did not start slowly or give any final warnings. One moment the desert was quiet except for the growing wind, and the next moment the world exploded into chaos. The storm wall rose from the northern horizon like a moving mountain of red sand and green lightning. It was 3 miles high and stretched across the entire sky. The sound it made was not just noise. It was a physical force that shook the ground and made the air itself vibrate. Taemin and Sora were inside their simple shelter when the storm hit. The first blast of wind made their metal walls shake and bend, but the angled design did exactly what Taemin had planned. Instead of hitting the walls straight on, the wind slid up and over the shelter, carrying most of its force away. The electromagnetic readings are off the scale, Sora shouted over the noise, looking at her device. Whatever this storm is, it is not natural. Through the small window Taemin had built into their shelter, they could see what was happening to the aliens. The sight was terrifying. Veltar's energy dome was the first to fail. The crystal alien had been sitting calmly in the center of the blue shield, confident that no natural force could break through advanced energy barriers. But the red destroyer brought electromagnetic chaos that turned Veltar's own technology against the alien. The green lightning in the storm created energy patterns that resonated with Veltar's crystal body. Instead of being protected by the dome, the alien became a giant antenna that attracted the chaotic energy. The blue dome flickered, changed to red, then to purple, and finally exploded in a shower of sparks. Veltar screamed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with wind chimes. The alien's crystal body began to crack as the electromagnetic storm interfered with the energy patterns that held the being together. The once proud crystal alien fell to the ground, lights flickering weakly inside the damaged body. Mordax's underground tunnels became death traps. The armored alien had been so confident in the protection of thick earth and rock. But the Red Destroyer was not just wind and sand. It brought temperature changes so extreme that the ground itself became dangerous. The storm's electromagnetic fields heated the metal in Mordax's armor until it glowed red-hot. The alien screamed in pain as the protective plates became torture devices. At the same time, the temperature swings made the tunnel walls crack and crumble. Sand began pouring in through thousands of tiny gaps that the alien had never noticed. Mordax tried to dig deeper, but the storm had turned the sand into something like liquid. The harder the alien dug, the faster the sand flowed in. Soon Mordax was trapped in a collapsing maze of tunnels, burning from the inside and drowning in sand from the outside. Liss faced a different kind of horror. The gas alien had always been able to control air currents and atmospheric conditions, but the Red Destroyer brought air that was not normal air. It was filled with charged particles, toxic dust, and pressure changes that happened faster than any living thing could adapt to. The storm began to tear Liss apart at the molecular level. The alien's gas form started to disperse, scattered by winds that moved in impossible directions. Liss tried to pull the scattered parts back together, but the electromagnetic chaos made it impossible to maintain control. "I cannot hold together," Liss screamed, the voice now coming from a dozen different places as the alien's consciousness spread thin across the desert. "The storm is tearing me apart." Kes had seemed the most prepared for disaster, claiming that his species had survived extinction events before. But the four-armed alien had made one fatal mistake, underestimating the power of nature when it goes truly wild. The Red Destroyer brought pressure, changes so severe that Kes's body could not adapt fast enough. The alien's gray skin began to bubble and crack as internal pressure fought against external pressure. Kes tried to find shelter behind the large rock, but the electromagnetic fields turned the rock into a giant magnet that attracted metal debris from the crashed ship. Chunks of twisted metal flew through the air like bullets, and Kes could not dodge them all with only 4 arms. The alien fell, bleeding from multiple wounds, as more debris continued to rain down from the chaos above. Inside their simple shelter, Taman and Sora listened to the screams of the dying aliens and knew they had to act. "We have to help them," Sora said, moving toward the shelter's entrance. "It is suicide to go out there," Taman replied, but he was already putting on his worksuit and gathering rope from their supplies. "But we cannot let them die." The human engineer had built their shelter with more than just survival in mind. He had included anchor points for ropes, multiple exit routes, and handholds for moving around in bad weather. These features had seemed unnecessary to the aliens, but now they would save lives. Taman tied one end of a rope around his waist and the other end to the strongest anchor point inside the shelter. Sora did the same with a second rope. Together, they opened the shelter's door and stepped into the fury of the Red Destroyer. The storm hit them like a physical wall. Sand blasted against their faces, and the wind tried to pick them up and throw them away. But they stayed low, used the rope as a guide, and fought their way toward the nearest alien in trouble. Veltar was closest, lying broken on the ground with crystal fragments scattered around the alien's body. The electromagnetic storm was still interfering with Veltar's energy matrix, making it impossible for the alien to heal or even move. Taman grabbed Veltar under the arms and began dragging the crystal alien toward their shelter. The weight was incredible. Crystal was much heavier than flesh, but Taman had grown up doing physical work. He knew how to use leverage and body mechanics to move heavy objects. Sora guided them back along the rope, shouting directions over the noise of the storm. Step by step, they fought their way back to the shelter, dragging Veltar to safety. Once inside, they could see the extent of the crystal alien's injuries. Cracks ran through Veltar's body like a broken window, and the lights inside flickered weakly. But the alien was alive and away from the electromagnetic interference. "How?" Veltar whispered, the voice barely audible. "How did your primitive shelter survive when my advanced technology failed?" Taman did not answer. He was already preparing to go back out for the others. There was no time for explanations when beings were dying in the storm. The rescue of Mordax was the hardest. The armored alien was trapped deep in the collapsed tunnels, and the sand was still pouring in. Taman had to dig with his bare hands while Sora held a rope that led back to their shelter. When they finally pulled Mordax free, the alien's armor was still glowing with heat from the electromagnetic effects. They had to wait for it to cool down before they could drag the insect alien to safety. Liss was the strangest rescue. The gas alien was scattered across a wide area, parts of consciousness drifting in different directions. Taman and Sora had to move through the storm, gathering pieces of Liss in containers and bottles salvaged from the ship. It took 3 trips to collect enough of Liss to reform a thinking being. Inside the shelter, the gas alien slowly pulled together into a coherent form, though much smaller and weaker than before. Kess was bleeding badly when they found the 4-armed alien, but still conscious. The alien looked up at Taman with surprise and something that might have been respect. "Why?" Kess asked as they carried the injured alien to safety. "Why risk your lives for us? We mocked your shelter. We called you primitive." Taman looked back at the storm that was still raging outside their simple shelter. Shelter that now protected 6 beings instead of 2. "Because that is what humans do," he said simply. Inside the human shelter, 6 beings huddled together as the red destroyer continued to rage outside. The simple structure that the aliens had mocked now stood as the only thing between them and certain death. Veltar lay on the floor, crystal body still cracked and flickering with weak light. The once proud alien who had boasted about energy shields now depended on basic human engineering for survival. "I do not understand," Veltar whispered. "My dome was powered by crystalline batteries that could run a city. How did your metal and cloth succeed where my technology failed?" Taman was busy checking the shelter's systems, the air filtration, the structural supports, the sealed water containers. "Your energy shield tried to fight the storm," he explained while working. "It tried to create a perfect barrier that nothing could cross. But the storm was too chaotic, too powerful. It found ways to turn your own energy against you." Sora knelt beside the injured crystal alien, using her basic medical knowledge to examine the damage. "Our shelter does not fight the storm," she added. "It works with the storm. The angled walls let the wind slide past instead of hitting full force. The multiple anchor points spread the stress across many places instead of creating weak points." Mordax was in terrible pain from the burns, where the electromagnetic storm had heated the alien's armor. The proud warrior who had claimed underground was always safe now understood the truth differently. "My tunnel should have protected me," Mordax groaned. "I dug deep enough to avoid any surface problem." "You dug straight down," Taman pointed out gently. "That created a funnel shape that concentrated the electromagnetic effects. The deeper you went, the more focused the energy became. Plus you relied on your armor for protection, but metal conducts both heat and electrical energy." Taman showed Mordax how the human shelter was designed. The metal pieces were separated by non-conductive materials. The structure had multiple layers that created air gaps for insulation. Most importantly, it was built to flex and bend rather than stand rigid against forces too strong to resist. Liss had managed to pull most of the scattered consciousness back together, but the gas alien was still weak and confused. "I controlled storms on my home world," Liss said in a voice like distant wind. "I became one with the atmospheric forces. How could this storm be so different?" Sora checked her weather instruments, which still worked despite the chaos outside. "The storms on your world were natural," she explained. "They followed normal patterns of air pressure and temperature. But this red destroyer has electromagnetic components that interact with charged particles in ways that do not happen in normal weather." "You tried to control forces that cannot be controlled," Taman added. "The storm has too many variables changing too fast. Our shelter does not try to control anything. It just protects us from the effects." Kess was the most seriously injured, bleeding from multiple wounds where flying debris had hit the 4-armed alien. Sora was doing her best to bandage the cuts with strips of cloth from their emergency supplies. "My people survived extinction events," Kess said weakly. "We always adapted to whatever conditions we faced." "Adaptation takes time," Taman replied, helping Sora with the bandages. "Evolution works over thousands or millions of years. But this storm changes conditions faster than any living thing can adapt. You needed protection first, then time to adapt." As they tended to the wounded aliens, Taman explained how human shelters had evolved over thousands of years of dealing with natural disasters. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, blizzards. Earth had thrown every kind of catastrophe at humanity, and humans had learned from each one. "We learned to build for the worst case. Not the normal case," he said while checking their food and water supplies. "We learned that redundancy is better than perfection. If one system fails, there should be 2 backups ready to take over." The shelter demonstrated these principles. The air filtration system had 3 different layers: cloth filters to catch large particles, charcoal to absorb chemicals, and sand to trap the finest dust. If one layer failed, the others would still protect them. The structural supports included the main framework, secondary braces, and emergency backup supports. Even if half the shelter was damaged, the remaining parts could still keep them safe. The food and water were stored in multiple small containers instead of one large one. If some containers were lost or damaged, they would still have enough supplies to survive. But how did you know to prepare for this specific type of storm? Veltar asked. The crystal alien's lights were getting stronger as the electromagnetic interference began to fade slightly. Sora showed them the weather data she had found in the ship's computer. We did not know exactly what would happen, she admitted, but the data showed that big storms hit this planet regularly. We prepared for the general idea of a severe storm, and our preparations happened to work for this specific storm. That is the key, Taemin added. We do not try to predict exactly what will go wrong. We build systems that can handle many different types of problems. Flexibility is more important than specialization. As the night wore on, the aliens began to understand how different the human approach was from their own. Each alien species had evolved to excel in specific conditions. Veltar's people had mastered energy manipulation. Mordax's species had developed incredible physical strength and armor. Lys's kind could control atmospheric conditions, and Kess's people could adapt to environmental changes. But humans had evolved on a planet where conditions changed constantly and unpredictably. They had learned to survive not by mastering specific forces, but by building systems that could handle whatever came next. Your planet must have been very dangerous, Mordax observed, flexing claws that had been useless against the electromagnetic storm. Earth taught us that nature does not care how advanced we think we are. Sora replied. A hurricane does not care about our technology. An earthquake does not respect our cities. A flood does not stop because we built walls. We learned to work with these forces instead of trying to dominate them. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the human shelter the temperature remained stable. The air stayed clean and breathable. The structure creaked and flexed but did not break. Water did not leak through the seals and sand did not find its way past the filters. Most importantly, all 6 survivors were alive and relatively safe. As dawn approached, the sound of the wind began to change. The constant roar became less intense, and the electromagnetic readings on Sora's instruments started to drop from extreme levels to merely dangerous ones. The storm is weakening, she announced. Through their small window, they could see the first hints of normal daylight penetrating the red sand clouds. The green lightning was less frequent, and the temperature swings were becoming less severe. But the real test would come when they opened the door and saw what the Red Destroyer had done to the world outside. Would anything be left of the alien shelters that had seemed so advanced just a few days ago? More importantly, would the aliens understand what they had learned about human engineering and the wisdom that comes from thousands of years of surviving on a dangerous world? The storm was ending, but the real changes in how these beings viewed humanity and technology were just beginning. The Red Destroyer finally passed at dawn on the 4th day, leaving behind a transformed landscape. When Taemin carefully opened the door of their shelter, the 6 survivors looked out at a world that seemed alien even to the aliens themselves. The desert had been scoured clean. Rocks that had stood for centuries were gone, ground to powder by the storm's fury. The crashed ship had been buried under tons of sand and debris. Strange new formations of fused sand and metal dotted the landscape like abstract sculptures created by forces too powerful for any mind to fully understand. But in the middle of this devastation, one small structure remained intact. The human shelter stood firm, its simple metal and cloth construction barely damaged by the storm that had reshaped the planet's surface. Veltar was the first to step outside, crystal body still showing cracks but able to move again. The alien looked around at the destroyed landscape and then back at the human shelter, with something that might have been awe. "Where is my energy dome?" Veltar asked, though the answer was obvious. There was nothing left of the advanced energy shield, not even debris. The electromagnetic storm had completely disrupted the energy patterns that had created it. Mordax emerged from the shelter more slowly, still in pain from the burns where the storm had turned the alien's armor against its owner. The proud warrior looked for the tunnel system that had taken hours to dig. There was no sign it had ever existed. The sand had been churned and mixed so thoroughly that the tunnels had been erased from existence. My burrow, Mordax said quietly. I was so sure that going underground was the safest choice. Lys floated weakly beside them, the gas alien's form still smaller and less solid than before the storm. I thought I could become one with the storm, Lys whispered. Instead, it nearly scattered me across the entire planet. Kes limped outside last, supported by Sora's shoulder. The four-armed alien's wounds were bandaged, but still healing. My people's adaptability meant nothing when the changes came too fast to adapt to, Kes admitted. They spent the morning exploring the area around their shelter, salvaging what they could from the buried ship and taking inventory of their supplies. The aliens worked alongside the humans now, no longer acting superior or dismissive. The storm had taught them all a hard lesson about the difference between advanced technology and practical engineering. I have been thinking about what you said, Feltar told Taemin as they dug through the sand looking for useful materials, about how your shelter works with the storm instead of fighting it. My people have always believed that the most advanced solution is the best solution, but advanced and effective are not the same thing, are they? Taemin found a piece of electronics that might still work and handed it to Sora for testing. My grandfather used to fix machines, he replied. He always said that the best tool is the one that gets the job done, not the one that looks most impressive. Sora's instruments detected something buried deeper in the sand. They dug carefully and found part of the ship's communication system, damaged but potentially repairable. If we can fix this, we might be able to send a distress signal, she said. Mordax used powerful claws to move the heavy debris, but now the alien worked as part of a team instead of trying to solve everything alone. On my world, strength means being able to overcome any obstacle by force, the armored alien said. But some obstacles cannot be overcome. They must be survived. That is wisdom my species took a long time to learn, Taemin agreed. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is bend instead of breaking. As they worked to repair the communication device, Lys helped by manipulating air currents to blow sand away from delicate components. The gas aliens' movements were more careful now, more cooperative with the natural forces instead of trying to dominate them. I always thought that controlling the environment meant imposing my will on it, Lys said. But you humans have learned to read what the environment wants to do, and then guide it gently in directions that help you. It is like dancing with forces instead of wrestling them. Kes proved surprisingly good at the detailed work needed to repair electronics, using all four hands to hold components while Taemin and Sora worked on them. Adaptation is not just about changing yourself, the gray-skinned alien observed. It is also about learning when not to change, when to stay flexible instead of becoming specialized. By late afternoon, they had managed to get the communication system partially working. The signal was weak, but it should be enough to reach any rescue ships that might be looking for them. As they waited for a response to their distress call, the aliens asked more questions about human engineering and survival methods. They wanted to understand how a species with no special physical abilities, no advanced energy manipulation, and no environmental control powers had managed to spread across the galaxy. We learned from every disaster, Sora explained. Every earthquake taught us something about building foundations. Every hurricane showed us new ways to design roofs and walls. Every flood revealed better drainage methods. We turned our weaknesses into strengths by learning from our failures. But we also learned to work together, Taemin added. No single human could have built this shelter alone. It took thousands of years of knowledge passed down from generation to generation. We are strong because we share what we learn. Feltar's crystal body sparkled as the alien processed this information. My people guard our energy manipulation techniques carefully. Each individual must rediscover the basic principles alone. Perhaps this is why our solutions are so specialized and fragile. Sharing knowledge makes everyone stronger, Mordax agreed. I see that now. When I dug my tunnels, I only thought about my own needs. I did not consider what might help others, or what others might teach me. The conversation was interrupted by a crackling sound from the repaired communicator. A voice came through the static. A rescue ship had received their signal and was already on its way to Valtros. This is Captain Park of the rescue vessel Harmony, the voice said. We have you on our sensors. We will reach your position in approximately 6 hours. Are there any serious injuries among the survivors? Sora took the microphone. 6 survivors, minimal injuries. We have shelter and supplies. Thank you for coming. 6 survivors? The captain sounded surprised. Our records show that area was hit by a red destroyer. Those storms usually leave no survivors on the surface. Taman and Sora looked at each other and smiled. We had good shelter, Taman said into the microphone. As they waited for rescue, the aliens talked among themselves about what they had learned. Each species began to see how their own advanced abilities had made them overconfident and unprepared for situations outside their expertise. When we return to our worlds, we must share this knowledge, Veltar declared. Energy shields are powerful, but they should not be our only form of protection. Physical strength is important, Mordax added, but it must be combined with wisdom about when not to use that strength. Liss formed into a more solid shape, practicing the kind of controlled restraint that humans used in their engineering. Environmental control is useful, but working with natural forces may be more effective than trying to dominate them. Kess looked at the human shelter with new appreciation. Adaptability means being ready for situations you have never faced before. It means building systems that can handle unknown problems. When the rescue ship finally arrived, Captain Park was amazed to find all 6 survivors healthy and their shelter still standing. I have been running rescue operations for 20 years, she told them. I have never seen anyone survive a red destroyer on the surface, and I have certainly never seen a structure this simple withstand that kind of storm. As they loaded their salvaged equipment onto the rescue ship, the aliens made requests that surprised the human crew. Veltar wanted copies of human engineering manuals. Mordax asked for information about human construction techniques. Liss requested data on how humans had learned to work with natural forces instead of fighting them. Kess wanted to study human methods of knowledge sharing and cooperative problem solving. We thought we were the advanced species, Veltar told Captain Park as they prepared for departure. We thought humans were primitive because your technology looked simple. But we learned that simple does not mean easy, and advanced does not mean effective. Taman stood at the window of the rescue ship, looking down at Valthros as they left the planet behind. Their small shelter was still visible on the desert surface, a tiny mark of human ingenuity in an alien landscape. Will they really change how they do things? Sora asked, joining him at the window. Taman watched the planet shrink in the distance. Some will not. But the ones who do change will survive better than the ones who do not. That is how learning works, one disaster, one lesson at a time. Behind them, the 4 alien survivors were already deep in discussion about how to combine their natural abilities with human engineering principles. They had learned that being advanced was not about having the most sophisticated technology. It was about being prepared for whatever the universe might throw at you next. The red destroyer had passed, but its lessons would last forever.